It's been 4 months since President Trump said he was going to shake up the world economy. Tonight, Canadians are getting ready for economic chaos because a full-blown trade war with the US is becoming real. There is now a new $37 trillion in US debt. Deals worth billions of dollars disappear quickly. In empty buildings in the Midwest, machines that used to build the future are now just sitting there. Japanese utilities, German automakers, and British military companies are quietly moving their orders to other companies across the ocean. Do not go to Houston or Detroit. Instead, go to Vancouver and Toronto. What happens when all of the world's friends stop calling the United States and start calling Canada? There is more at stake than just trade if the shift continues. Power, work, and safety at home are also at risk. How far has the ground moved since we last stood here? How much more can it move before something breaks? Seventh, Brazil, the pick of the agricultural superpower. Imagine that the world's agricultural powerhouse, which feeds hundreds of millions of people, cut off America's technology lifeline in a quiet way. That's exactly what's going on in Brazil, and the effects are terrible. Brazilian farming has relied on American knowledge, tools, and new ideas for more than 100 years. American agricultural technology powers huge soy farms that stretch out to the sky, cattle ranches that are bigger than some U.S. states, and coffee plantations that feed markets around the world. That relationship of 100 years is falling apart. In the last 18 months, Brazil has bought 71% more farming technology from Canada than it did 18 months ago, but its contracts with American suppliers have dropped by 24%. The most important parts of modern farming are precision farming systems, advanced irrigation networks, and AI-powered crop tracking. What caused this huge change? Because they were focused on domestic markets and couldn't export much, American agricultural technology companies couldn't make their ideas work for mega farms in Brazil. When big Brazilian farmers needed tools that could keep an eye on millions of acres in real time, American companies offered bigger versions of equipment that was made for cornfields in Iowa. Canadian businesses took a different solution to the problem. They sent engineers to live on farms in Brazil to learn about the difficulties of tropical farming, running large-scale businesses, and integrating supply lines. As a result, Brazilian farmers couldn't get answers that were made just for them anywhere else. But this is about a lot more than just selling parts. Now, Brazilian agricultural companies are paying for research and development centers in the provinces of Canada. They are teaching their Canadian partners what they have learned over many years about large-scale gardening. Things like seeds, fertilizers, and processing technology used to come from the United States to Brazil. Now, these things are being made together in Canada. The flow of investments has gone in the opposite direction. Big Brazilian companies are buying up Canadian farms, setting up processing plants, and creating integrated supply chains that don't use any American providers at all. Brazilian engineers and agronomists work full-time in Canadian facilities where they share methods that were developed over many generations. In a private conversation, a top official at one of Brazil's biggest agribusiness firms explained the change. We needed partners who knew that working together over a long period of time is necessary in modern farming. Not connections based on transactions. Canada joined them as a partner. The damage to American farming interests has been terrible. Midwest companies that make equipment are seeing billion-dollar contracts with Brazil go away. Joint ventures between Canada and Brazil are taking market share away from seed companies. Agriculture. As international partnerships fall apart, research centers in Texas and California are cutting back on agricultural projects. Supply chains that didn't seem stable at first are now being affected by the FX. It's terrible enough to lose the world's agricultural superpower, but wait until you see what happened with America's closest friend in Asia. Japan is number 6, the revolution in silent energy. Think of Japan's industrial heartland stopping working because American energy providers can't get the fuel to them on time. That worst-case scenario almost came true, which is why America's most reliable Asian partner is quietly building a new future without American energy. America provided Japan with energy knowledge and supplies for 70 years, which helped it power its economic miracle. American LNG terminals, coal shipments, and energy technology kept Japanese factories running all the time, from rebuilding after the war to the technological change. That 70-year partnership is falling apart right in front of our eyes. The breakdown began with trust, or rather the lack of it. Japanese utility businesses have very small profit margins and very strict schedules. When American LNG terminals started to face delays in regulations and political meddling, Japanese power sources could have gone out. Industries worth billions of dollars were on the line. Canadian energy companies saw the chance and acted with surgical accuracy. Japanese companies could get services from new export ports in British Columbia that American companies couldn't promise. Long-term contracts with fixed prices and no political problems back up supply schedules that can be predicted. The move away from American producers has been quick and harsh. Just in the last 18 months, over $23 billion in long-term energy contracts have moved from American sites to Canadian ones, Japanese and industrial giants are now making deals with Canadian energy companies that are only valid until 2035. But energy was only the beginning. Japan's changing cars. Now, Canadian materials are being used to power the switch to electric cars that will define the next 10 years instead of American ones. Canadian mines are sending lithium and cobalt to Japanese factories across the Pacific. Rare earth elements are also being processed in Canadian facilities. The transfer of technology has happened after the elements. Japanese engineers now work full-time in Canadian factories where they share advanced manufacturing techniques and set up study programs with other scientists from both countries. Once there was a natural flow of innovation between Tokyo and California. Now most of it is centered in the corridor between Toronto and Vancouver. Big Japanese car companies like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan are setting up R&D centers in different Canadian areas. They are paying for Canadian mining companies to grow and teaching Canadian workers new ways to make things, and putting together integrated supply chains that won't need American sources for decades. The geopolitical effects go beyond markets for energy. Japanese companies are now putting money into green energy projects in Canada. These projects include building wind and solar farms in different provinces. What began as an emergency source has turned into a long-term relationship, with Japanese companies pledging billions of dollars to help build up Canada's infrastructure. As contracts with Japan end, energy workers in Texas and Louisiana are seeing their plants run at lower performance. In Wyoming and Montana, mining towns are seeing their activities cut back. The effects are being felt in American supply lines that didn't seem stable at first. A top executive at Japan's biggest utility company, who did not want to be named, described the new situation. Our industry can't depend on producers who see energy as a political tool instead of an important business need. Canada sees energy as a business need. When the world's third-largest economy picks Canadian partners over American ones, it shows that trust around the world has changed fundamentally. But what's happening with Europe's economic powerhouse is much bigger than this energy revolution. Fifth place goes to Germany, the flight of precision engineering. Imagine if the country that rebuilt Europe's economy turned away from its oldest friend and went after a competitor that no one saw coming. That's how things are going in Germany. And it may be the most shocking act of betrayal in the history of modern trade. The United States helped Germany's economy grow after the war, which was a huge success. German industrial dominance was built on aid from the Marshall Plan, the sharing of technology, and integrated supply lines. American ideas and materials helped German precise engineering from the assembly lines for BMW to the chemical plants along the Rhine. It's amazing how quickly that 75-year partnership is falling apart. The auto industry tells the story with stark facts. German automakers have switched 43% of the parts they buy in North America from American sources to Canadian ones. In the last 2 years, we're talking about high-tech battery materials, precise metals, and specialized chemicals that are needed to make electric cars. What caused these businesses to leave? The political setup in the United States hurt American suppliers. German engineers couldn't plan production schedules or keep delivery promises to customers around the world because of changes in trade policies, unclear regulations, and problems in the supply chain. German precision manufacturing needed something that Canadian sources could provide: reliability. German businesses were able to plan years ahead of time instead of months because of stable rules, fixed price contracts, and sure delivery windows. The amount and range of technology transfer has been amazing. Large German companies are setting up stable research and development centers in the provinces of Canada. BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Volkswagen are all helping to expand their factories in Canada. They are giving Canadian engineers access to secret technology and training them to work on integrated supply lines that will work without American suppliers. Big German chemical companies like BASF and Bayer now get unique materials from Canadian companies instead of American ones. Advanced polymers, industrial catalysts, and pharmaceutical precursors used to instantly flow from American factories. Now, these things are made in Canada with money from Germany. But the real shock is in the money that is coming in. Big German companies are now giving billions of dollars to Canada for building projects. In Ontario, chemical companies are building places to handle chemicals. In Quebec, companies that make machines are setting up assembly lines. From an emergency source, it has grown into a strategic relationship. The car industry is a good example of this change. As German companies switched to electric cars, they needed to make sure they had a steady supply of battery materials. American suppliers were unable to promise delivery dates because of uncertain regulations and problems in the supply chain. There would be no political problems, and Canadian providers would always be able to deliver on time. When asked about the change in private, a top trade official in Berlin was frank. Because some suppliers use trade as a political tool, we can't base our economic strategy on them. Canada does business the way it should be done. In the United States, the human cost has been terrible. In the Rust Belt, places that make things are seeing German contracts worth billions of dollars move northward. Chemical plants in Louisiana are making less because German buyers are getting their supplies from plants in Canada. As sales drop, towns in Ohio and Michigan that make precision goods are letting people go. The implication: when German companies consistently switch from American suppliers to Canadian ones, it shows a lack of trust that goes beyond business ties. Precision engineering from Germany was meant to give the United States a permanent edge in global markets. In fact, it's now Canada's newest strategic treasure. But if you think losing Europe's economic powerhouse is bad, wait until you see what's going on with our southern neighbor. Number 4, Brazil, the realignment of the continents. Imagine that the best trade relationship in North America fell apart because of political issues in the United States. The border hasn't changed, but the rules for economic union between the US and Mexico are being changed so that Canada takes America's place. It took 30 years for Mexico to build its export economy around American supply lines. Goods and raw materials moved south. Products in the middle were sent north to be processed. The finished goods were sent back to the south to be put together one last time before being sent around the world. This back-and-forth integration made trade possible and provided jobs for millions of people on both sides of the border. That smooth merger is breaking up at a scary rate. American trade policy chaos has worn out Mexican producers. Without notice, new tariffs show up. The way that borders are inspected changes overnight. Every time the government changes, so do the rules about following the law at work. American politics get in the way of companies that need to plan their work months in advance. Canadian providers saw the chance and acted quickly to get a piece of the Mexican market. They gave Mexican manufacturers something that American suppliers could no longer provide: long-term relationships that would not be affected by political unrest, stability, and the ability to plan ahead. The numbers show how big this shift of the continents is. In the past year, Mexico's purchases from American sources have gone down by 19%, while its purchases from Canada have gone up by 51%. Electronic parts are now being bought by major automakers in central Mexico. Instead of coming from Texas and Michigan, Ontario and British Columbia have high-tech equipment and supplies. These changes aren't just meant to switch from American sources to Canadian ones, though. Mexican businesses are setting up permanent operations in the provinces of Canada so they can reach North American markets without having to rely on American supply lines. Joint ventures are being made that combine the production know-how of Mexico with the materials and logistics networks of Canada. The aircraft industry is a good example of this new partnership. Aerospace companies in Mexico used to get advanced parts from American sources, but now they only work with companies in Canada. It takes weeks instead of months to finish a project now. Multiple border points used to be needed for quality control, but now it's all done in one place. Big Mexican automakers like Grupo Bimbo and C-Max now get their parts from Canadian companies instead of American ones. Advanced composites, specialty chemicals, and precision parts that used to automatically flow from American factories are now supplied by Canadian competitors who offer better service and more reliable delivery times. Investments have moved in the same way that trade does. Large Mexican companies are paying for the growth of factories in Canada. Engineers from Mexico are working full-time in operations in Canada. The corridor between Mexico and Canada is now where most of the technology transfer that used to happen naturally between Mexico and the US takes place. Border towns in the United States are directly feeling the effects on their economies. Texas towns that may Key things are seeing Mexican contracts go away. Arizona's transportation companies say their business is going down because trade routes are moving north. Supply chain networks that were built over Mexican factories that used to get their electricity and natural gas from the United States are now working with Canadian energy companies on green energy projects. Now, instead of American partners, solar and wind farms are being built all over Mexico with help from Canada. A top Mexican trade official who did not want to be named talked about the change and described the strategic calculations. Partners who see trade as a political tool are not what we need. Instead, we need partners who know that business needs stability. Canada joined them as a partner. It has effects that go far beyond business. The United States trades with Mexico more than any other country, and it is an important ally in fighting immigration, drug crime, and threats to regional security. It changes the whole North American security system when Mexico's business interests line up with Canadian suppliers instead of American ones. What was meant to be a success story for North American economic integration is now showing how bad politics can ruin business ties. But what's happening in the world's biggest democracy is much worse than Mexico's move toward Canada. Third, India, where tech talent is leaving in droves. Imagine that the biggest democracy in the world, which should be a natural ally because of shared values and strategic goals, picks a different partner for its economic future in secret. That's exactly what's happening with India, and it has huge effects on America's ability to lead the world. It was thought that America's biggest success story of the 21st century would be India's rise as a technology and economic giant. There should have been no way to break up this partnership because they shared democratic ideals, had huge consumer markets, and had different but complementary economic strengths. Instead, that partnership is falling apart as Indian businesses and institutions slowly shift their relationships to Canadian ones. The breakdown began with the way immigration was handled. The United States put limits on skilled worker visas, made it harder to do business, and treated Indian professionals badly culturally, all of which made partnerships seem like punishment. When Indian tech companies needed to work together with Western partners without any problems, they had to deal with visa delays and legal issues all the time. The opposite was true of Canada's immigration laws. Canada became the best place for Indian talent and business thanks to easier ways to get work permits and permanent residency, as well as communities that are friendly and open. This big change can be seen in the technology field. Indian IT giants have moved their main businesses from cities in the United States to cities in Canada. Software development, AI research, and digital innovation used to easily move between Bangalore and Silicon Valley. These activities are now mostly centered in the route between Mumbai and Toronto. The numbers show how big this shift is. In the last 18 months, Indian tech exports to Canada have grown by 78%, while contracts for technology services with American companies have dropped by 31%. Big Indian companies are deciding to put their Western headquarters in Canadian towns instead of American ones. That being said, technology is just the start. Indian drug companies have found it easier to get into and make more money in the Canadian market than in the US, where regulations are becoming more unfriendly. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories and Cipla are building large delivery networks in the provinces of Canada while reducing their operations in the United States.